each body has its own ecosystem. So they can have something that, like too much heat, too much cold, we can work on that with herbs. While acupuncture, we work on really the mechanics and the electricity of the body so that it's able to flow more easily, because the body does its thing. It knows how to self-heal. It's just that sometimes when we work against it or against its own nature for so long, it's going to feel it. Like, you can have somebody with the most energy in the world, but if they are exhausted and don't sleep at all, even the most energetic person is going to be exhausted and won't be able to function.
Dr. Michelle Oravitz, she is an acupuncturist that specializes in fertility. You guys know this subject is very near and dear to my heart. You know, my mom was a fertility specialist that specialized in acupuncture. And so I really wanted to seek out an individual that I think could come into our community and answer so many of the questions that you guys are having. Dr. Oravitz, Michelle, thank you so much for taking time from your incredibly busy practice to spend time with us today.
It's a pleasure, Haylie. Thank you so much for having me on today.
I think we're going to have some really good, fun topics. Your book, which is, it's new out, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The Way of Fertility, Awaken Your Reproduction Potential Through the Power of Ancient Wisdom, is, I think, really needed right now. My mom and I have been in practice for over 30 years. But there is a massive increase in individuals having women's health issues. And I feel like the age of what's happening has just gotten younger and younger. Are you seeing that in your practice?
I am, unfortunately. It's something that not only for women, but for men, it's definitely in the rise for sure.
Well, you said something interesting when you said for men. So when we were, in the thick of things in the fertility space, we could not believe how many people forgot that men make up a significant component in fertility, really more than 50%, what we were saying. But I've heard, it's been a little bit of time before I've been so indoctrinated in that space, but I've heard it's even more.
It's definitely like a combination, because women ultimately, they also have to work on like the inflammation. So even if it's a perfect embryo and it's good egg health, like if she has inflammation or certain autoimmune conditions, because ultimately their body carries the baby. So,
right.
So it could be definitely like a combination of things, but for sure the two are equally as important
to look at.
Yes.
So let me ask you, of all the things, I grew up with acupuncture. My daughter, even when she was tiny, she would say, "Grandma, make me a unicorn." She loved.
Oh yeah, my daughter used to say that with a third eye point, the yin tongue.
Absolutely. But why fertility? What was the inspiration that had you focus on this particular reproductive health issues?
So when I first started my journey into study Chinese medicine, I started out as a patient. I used to be an architect, and I worked in New York in corporate America, and very, very stressed out. And I had irregular periods for like years and years and years. And what I mean by that is like 3 months would go by with no period. And my circadian rhythm was off, which now we know could impact your period, or very much linked to irregular cycles. And I had a lot going on that I didn't even realize were off. And then finally, after years of going to doctors and being prescribed the birth control pill, I finally found an acupuncturist. And this is like probably 12 years after being completely irregular. So number one, I could have thought, okay, I'm never going to be normal because that's just my body, because that's what most doctors really told me.
Right.
And I could have just believed that and never really seeked any other solution. And then I did happen to find an acupuncturist who's amazing, and also happened to specialize in gynecology in China before he came to America. So he completely regulated my period, and I was blown away. So that was just like me, the beginning of my fascination with Chinese medicine and with natural health. And I eventually met my husband, who's an emergency medicine doctor, like a Western medicine doctor. And he actually encouraged me to go back to school for natural medicine, because he saw that I wasn't really as into my work. And And so, long story short, I ended up studying Ayurveda at first, and then eventually Chinese medicine. Just was really fascinated with natural medicine as a whole, and I think that it was definitely a personal thing. And also, not that this was part of it at the time, but like little by little realized that my mom actually suffered from secondary infertility and had a struggle having me.
Wow.
So I'm kind of a product of a woman really struggling for many years to conceive. And interestingly enough, looking back, my dad used to smoke. So I'm like, was it her? Was it him? You never know.
What was
So
the
I think it was just,
what was the contributing factor? You said something that I just want to pull us back to for a second, was that having irregular cycles, you were told, because this happens so much. I was just digging through our community. We have this membership community that, people post questions and people post their experiences. And they were told that something was just them. It was just normal and there was nothing that they could do. And that's what you were told with when your periods were not regular. And I mean, it's cool because I've seen it clinically so much, but I love you sharing, if you could a little bit, some of the signs that might be common, but don't mean that they're okay and don't have to stay that way that you see in your practice. The irregular periods, like people just say, well, go on the pill that'll re-regulate you, except for, you we're not supposed to get pregnant on the pill. And also there's all kinds of side effects to that. In best case scenario, there's some side effects. So an irregular period, is that a big red flag if you're going to be kind of looking at your fertility health and stuff?
Yes. So you want it to be somewhat regular. That doesn't mean that it has to be a 28 day like cycle that's textbook. It has to be regular really for you. It could be like a little over 30 days. That's still within a regular amount, or even 26 days could be for some people. Ideally longer than 28 days, because then that ultimately allows for enough time really for things to develop. And also for the luteal phase where we do conceive and, the egg fertilizes and it attaches to the uterus lining. But yeah, so that's one of the things. But another thing is also cramps, like really severe cramps. That's not normal. It's common, but it's not normal. And it could be it could be endometriosis, but it doesn't have to be. It could be a lot of inflammation in the body. Typically, inflammation leads to a lot of pain. Could be what we called cold in the uterus or stagnation, according to Chinese medicine terms. So there are definitely a lot of things like that. You need to look to make sure that you're ovulating, because you could have a perfect 28-day cycle.
Right.
You could bleed, but that doesn't confirm that you ovulated. And you can even have a positive LH test, OPK, and that could still not prove that you ovulated.
Hi, it's Haylie, your host. I know firsthand what it feels like to find real, impactful solutions to your struggles. And I know what it feels like to lose hope. We are being bombarded by toxins every single day. As a matter of fact, the world's largest single environmental health risk is air pollution. One thing that is becoming crystal clear is that environmental toxic burdens in our bodies must be addressed. Let me help you tackle toxic burden. Go to HayliePomroy.com/detox and download my free Detox Decoded Masterclass. Let's give you a fighting chance. I know what it feels like to lose hope, whether you're dealing with fatigue, mast cell activation, an autoimmune disorder, long COVID, viral reactivation, anxiety or depression, or inflammation. All of it can feel overwhelming. I will teach you nutrition and natural therapies to help your body eliminate toxins. I cannot wait to see you there. Again, that's HayliePomroy.com/detox.
A couple things that you just said about inflammation. So we've had a lot of individuals that have, really heavy periods, lots of clotting, lots of cramping, and we will address from a food perspective or supplement perspective, the inflammatory perspective of the body as a whole, systemic inflammation. With acupuncture, is that one of the many, I know you look at a lot of different facets, but is that one primary thing that you look at somebody that's having, gynecological health or fertility health, or is inflammation a big one for you?
So it's interesting because in Chinese medicine, we don't necessarily call it inflammation, but we definitely, like, what we do helps inflammation. So we could look at something as excess heat, and seeing like maybe a deficiency in yin, which is kind of like the moisturizing, the aspect that like cools things down. And that can cause a type of heat because it doesn't have that counterbalance. So we look at it really as like a whole, and then we look at the spleen and stomach, which are the gut health aspect of it, which ultimately, if they're not in check and doing their jobs, could lead to inflammation. So I do, in my own world, work on that and consider inflammation. But when we're trained in Chinese medicine, we don't necessarily look at it as inflammation per se. We look at it as elements. And kind of like fire, things like that.
So in Chinese medicine, I always love the difference in nomenclature, in naming, and in Ayurvedic medicine too, right? Oftentimes the way in which we describe a condition of the body, whether it's stagnation or wind or heat or leans much more into, in my opinion, an observation of what happens in nature.
Yes, it 100% reflects nature. Yeah. The laws of nature.
The laws of nature. And my goodness, I don't know how we got so disconnected in medicine from the laws of nature.
Yeah.
We plucked humans out of the pool of species and said, no, now you don't integrate with the world, the earth, the soil, your nutrients, but we do.
It's pretty crazy. I actually saw something on Gaia the other day. I don't remember if it was a Transcendence or something. It was a series. I don't know if you've ever heard of Gaia, but they have lots of amazing shows on there. And it's not just yoga. It's like a lot of interesting content. And one of them was about the domestication of dogs and how dogs originally came from wolves. We domesticated them, really shifted how we breed, and it changed their health, and it impacts their health actually. And that, one thing that I was like, wow, we're domesticated. Right. And they said the domestication of humans and how we are removed from nature. We used to be hunters and gatherers, and not that we want to go necessarily back, but like, we're domesticated. We don't have that. We've sort of severed that connection to nature. And I think some of us are thirsting to get that back, to get back to that.
I think it's good that we're thirsting to get it back because I think it's a medical necessity. That's
100%.
I've just decided because I'm doing my PhD in neuroimmunology, and I grew up, Chinese medicine, herbal medicine, homeopathy, you name it, right? And that was, the only way that I was able to change my own personal health trajectory. I've just decided I'm going to layer a bunch of nomenclature that other people are comfortable with into it. Because it's so funny. We were talking in clinic the other day, and it was like, we incorporate at the Institute for Neuroimmune Medicine, we incorporate acupuncture for all of our patients. And it's not because the virologists and the immunologists and the hematologists, although they're huge advocates now, but when they come to the Institute, it's because nothing else, there's not a drug or a medication with a complex disease or illness that can get a patient to wellness. We might be able to mitigate the chemistry through chemicals. We might even be able to mute some symptoms, but we have not found a way through allopathic medicine to change the trajectory of a health in a positive way, right?
Right. That's true.
In complex illness. Now, maybe, you have a strep infection, you take an antibiotic. I mean, I think there's natural therapies personally, but I can at least understand the connection, right? Maybe. But like, it's not because they wanted to, but it's because we get the worst of the most complex patients, whether it's, we say 10 years and 20 doctors before they land in our clinic. And we absolutely engage in herbal, homeopathy, Ayurvedic, and acupuncture is huge for us. There's just no way to realign the body. Can you explain to our listeners, like, why does it work? First,
you mean Chinese medicine, like acupuncture?
Yeah. Like, because like you said, it's not a reductionistic. I mean, I know there are some herbals that, like, we take yin cha san if we get colds in our in our family.
Yes.
We're like, who has yin chow? You know, I mean, that's
Right.
our family
That
does
sore
that.
throat one.
Yeah, we get the sore throat, we get the little,
Yeah.
burning in the ears or whatever. I mean, there is some, symptom herb. Same with Ayurveda, but there is a complex. There is something. For me, it seems magical. There's something so profound, and I don't know. I love to hear people's perspective that really study this. I get to be a user of, right? A believer of, but I've never had the luxury or the time or, to study it like you. So why does it change the trajectory? Why can it alter the rhythm in a woman's cycle? What's happening?
So I always look at like a woman's cycle, especially is like almost like a train that got derailed. We need to put it back on the rhythm, like back in its own rhythm and alignment. And part of it is really connecting. Like one of the things that I suggest for people to do is connect back with nature, because if you get that early morning sun, that can anchor a circadian rhythm. So it's even just connecting with that fire, that yang energy. The yang is the fire, the heat. Yin is more cooling. So, having that like natural elements to help you, can benefit you. So that's kind of like on a separate thing, because that's what Chinese medicine teaches about, but that's not necessarily Chinese medicine. What we do as Chinese medicine practitioners is we work with really two main pillars, but then we have other accessory tools. But the two main ones are really acupuncture and herbals. Some people really focus on just acupuncture. Some people just focus on just herbals. Some do a bit of both, most of them, most practitioners. And so the herbals work on the chemistry. So it's the pharmaceutical aspect. What I love about it, and actually my Ayurvedic teacher said, and I'll never forget, and I think what she said was so profound, was that when you're taking herbs versus pharmaceuticals, you're still taking something with the DNA intact. What is DNA but intelligence? That intelligence of the DNA of the herb is connecting with the intelligence of your own DNA in your cells. And so you have this communication that happens. It's done in a way that is much more compatible. And it's familiar to some extent because we're able to recognize it as something. Versus, yes, a lot of pharmaceuticals come from nature, but then they take out the intelligence. It's stripped away down to the chemical. It's like processed food versus whole food. It's kind of the same thing, right? So it's stripped away from that intelligence, and then it becomes like a robot that just keeps going, causing side effects. So oftentimes, if there are certain herbs as well that can cause side effects as well, depends on how strong they are. So it's not like herbs, herbs should also be kind of taken with caution. But what we do is we usually gear them towards imbalance that we see or like patterns that we see in the body. So each body has its own ecosystem. So they can have something that like too much heat, too much cold. We can work on that with herbs. While acupuncture, we work on really the mechanics and the electricity of the body so that it's able to flow more easily, because the body does its thing. It knows how to self-heal. It's just that sometimes when we work against it or against its own nature for so long, it's going to feel it. Like you can have somebody with the most energy in the world, but if they are exhausted and don't sleep at all, even the most energetic person is going to be exhausted and won't be able to function.
And we always said, like when you just said, if we're working against our body, I think sometimes it's hard to see what in the environment is working against our body too.
Yeah.
It's not our fault. Like, we could be working really hard to eat organic and vitamin G, we're getting our barefoot and walking in the sand or in the grass during the day, and we're getting sunshine, but smog, pollution, chemicals, toxins, all of those things are things that we have to adapt to. And I loved what you said about herbal medicine and philosophically working on the ecosystem of the body, because we have to adapt to our environment internally and externally. And I think with the reductionistic aspect of medicine is it's almost like it says, do this. And it doesn't tell an intelligent body the why, the how. There's no story. And in Ayurvedic and in Chinese medicine, that medicine is a teaching as opposed to a directing. I feel like that's why the healing happens as opposed to like, a person that came in the other day that said they didn't have a problem with their cholesterol. But he was like looking at things and seeing some of the, we go through this large questionnaire. And I said, "Are you sure you don't have a cholesterol issue? Gosh, a lot of the manifestation of what you're telling me and the energy and your hormones and your vitamin D being low really would be indication of someone not being able to metabolize cholesterol." And they said, "Well, no, because I've been on statins for 15 years. And I said, "Okay, so you've been on a drug that makes your chemistry better, but there's no teaching of how to metabolize the cholesterol. And so there's no healing that's occurred. If so, go off the med. But we know when you go off the med, the cholesterol comes back up." It's the difference in that Chinese and Ayurvedic medicine. It's a reteaching of the body too. And right. I know, Michelle, in your practice, you see people in person, but you also, which is, I think, really important to our community, you also do kind of like tele coaching, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Zoom calls and things of that nature. How do people get a hold of you? I wrote books, right? And I wrote books so that I could help all the people that I can't see in the clinic. And so the Way of Fertility, I love because you have all of these learnings that people, it's kind of more like a handbook, right? People need to have this. It gives them real practical things to do that they can change on a daily basis to enhance their fertility, both from a male and a female perspective. Everybody, and I think you should start young, guys. I think we need to teach our young women and men about this stuff. Really, this is what should be taught in class, is how the body works, how the reproductive system works, the learnings of nature, the how to care for your health, because it's more than just making babies. It's in Chinese medicine and in Ayurvedic medicine, it's about creative energy. And of course, you were an architect, you built things. So to me, it's super organic that you're here in this position that you're at now, because you're helping people build families and build lives and build energy to carry on the next generations. But how do people get a hold of you if they want to physically talk to you or talk about their fertility?
Yeah. So, they can go to my website, michelleoravitz.com. That's usually where they can find all of the information, including the book. And also, I'm on Instagram at the Wholesome Lotus Fertility, and people can DM me. I get a lot of DMs asking me questions. Of course, I always say I can't give any medical advice, especially if I don't really know a person's background and details.
Right. You guys, please only DM for an appointment or a book. Otherwise, don't DM your questions. It's just it's not practical. That's what I always tell people. Look, we have a lot of ways to contact us. It's like set up an appointment with one of our coaches, set up an appointment with one of our team. You have curated, generations and centuries of knowledge down into your practice to be able to gift that, to other individuals. And so that's what we want. So don't DM her just your questions. And for the love of God, don't send her your labs, right?
Yes, I don't want to see that.
Pictures
unless we have it in a HIPAA compliant, which I have like an EHR and yeah.
Of course. But people, our community, we post everything. We love it. I want to ask something that in our community asks us a lot. Two things. One, why do you think, what the heck is going on why we're seeing so much issues with fertility? So my daughter's 22 and her girlfriends, we're together a lot. We were all just in Vegas this last December. And the questions about their periods and IUDs and fertility, I didn't even think about that in my 20s, but there's issues, right? And then the other thing that our community wanted is on the other end is, if we have imbalances in our periods, is that sometimes an indication of what menopause is going to be like for us?
That's a good question. That I don't really know, but I would imagine that it could definitely, for sure, impact if it is not addressed. So I'll say that. I think that once things do get addressed. So for me, for example, because you could look at every part of a woman's life and the progress that her reproductive health makes. And you could say that my irregular periods would have really, as a foundation, would have impacted my fertility, which would be the next thing in line. But because I fixed that or regulated it, my fertility was fine. But if I didn't, I would have had many challenges, because when in the world was I even ovulating? So you could look at it the same way into menopause. is that if things are not regulated, and I see it not just as a physical manifestation, I see it as, and this is why Chinese medicine is different than Western medicine. They acknowledge and they consider the human spirit and the spirit of the organs and the personality and the emotions and all of it matters. So like whatever is happening to you emotionally could manifest physically. And if you are really working on that energetics, like people coming into me, they don't come in for anxiety. They're coming in for like maybe headaches. And then we resolve the headaches, but the anxiety gets resolved as well. Why? Because it's all part of the same energetic frequency. It's all moving. And once it starts to work better and to be more increased vitality, it impacts the mind as well.
I love that point. And we had a whole episode on medical gaslighting. I hate that we even
yeah. Don't get me started.
I know
the stuff that I hear.
No, I actually shied away from that word for a really long time, and I just feel like my community is just behind me, like shoving me, forward because people are, they're angry and they're. For a while, I think people were intimidated and maybe hurt privately, but now people are mad, right? And it's women and men. But for some reason, this disconnect, right, from we have a lot of individuals in our community that are going through different aspects of menopause, and I'm like, look, just because it's normal doesn't mean it's common doesn't mean it's normal, and we don't have to accept it. And there's so many things that you can do for it. But that disconnect between, spirit, people saying, I feel I'm sad, or I feel like I have a wet blanket over me. I can't really identify it maybe with depression or anxiety, but I just don't feel myself. I feel, clumsy or foggy. And they're like, well, it's just menopause.
I have a theory about that.
Okay. I would love it.
So I think that when we're younger, it's almost like my husband, he would abuse his body when he's younger, go and no sleep, this and that, went to medical school, whatever. When you're younger, you can deal with a lot more abuse, I guess. Like, you kind of abuse your body and shut down emotions that are there. You're stronger. You have a stronger lid to shut down those emotions. When you get to a certain point, when you're approaching menopause, that lid gets weaker. And it starts to flap and those emotions start to come out. But they're not just new emotions. They're emotions that were probably suppressed. And it's just that now you can't hold them down as strongly.
Yeah. And maybe with age, we have knowledge of the value of expressing them too.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That wisdom.
Yeah. That wisdom.
That comes in.
Yeah. We always like in Chinese medicine, I love, and correct me if I'm wrong. Again, I'm just a fan of it, right? And it changed my life. I mean, I have a autoimmune disorder, and I'm a huge proponent of Chinese medicine, both from an herbal and a physical application. But we were talking about like when you don't the energy moving up into the heart, right? The kidney yin kind of moving up into the heart through menopause, and our spirit is more awakened and alive, and maybe it just won't tolerate some of the bullshit that we've tolerated for so many years.
I think it's a natural progression. And I think that anything that at first seems like this challenge is a great opportunity, because I see it as like it's awakened. Even if it's awakened triggers, when things come out and it's really uncomfortable, although it's very uncomfortable. And I think that as humans, we don't like to feel uncomfortable, especially in our modern day times,
right.
But
it's
such an opportunity.
Yeah, it is an opportunity, but it's so frustrating when you walk into a visit where you're expressing how you feel, and maybe your vulnerability, and you're using your words, right, to articulate kind of what's going on, and you're told, maybe your labs are normal, maybe the 3 that they actually ran are normal, right? So I love that you said that Chinese medicine takes the spirit is so important. Our community right now, can you give us some either Chinese or Ayurvedic principles that today, like I would love 3 things. I always love 3 things that we can incorporate that will help the balance between our physical body and our spiritual body, which in that, if we're in that rhythm and in that balance, we're walking more rhythmically towards wellness. What are some things that we should do every day? I love the getting up and exposing yourself to sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
That one I wrote down.
Yeah. So that is really important, but really connecting with the elements of nature, like being outside a little bit more, listening to the birds. We know there's research that the sound of birds actually have a very calming effect on our nervous system, and getting that early morning sunlight will help anchor your circadian rhythm, which is going to help you sleep better, which I know that is one of the common difficulties, the common symptoms that happens when our hormones shift peri and after postmenopause. So that's going to help, but also grounding also helps the circadian rhythm, putting your feet on the earth. And
getting rid of the rubber soles for a minute. Like if you think about, we were driving and a big bolt of lightning hit this tree right in front of us and pulled an electrical line down. I was with a friend of mine in Florida, and we ran right over it. And I called a firefighter friend of mine and said, "Why didn't we get electrocuted?" And he said, "It's the rubber tires." That was the
right.
It blocks the energy, and yet the development of rubber sole shoes, I mean, it separates us from the earth. And someone said, "Oh, I don't really, believe in energetically, correlating with the earth." And I said, "Well, what about the magnetic pull, and how come gravity impacts you?"
He doesn't have to believe. They don't have to believe it. They can use. They've done this on the Earthing movie. They have a machine that can measure it in your body. As soon as you put your feet even on a grounding mat, it changes.
But also, you just don't fly off into outer space because you are a participant in gravity. Okay, you cannot believe, then the earth is flat, whatever, it's like, but, it's just kind of a funny concept when people say that. So I love that. And I'm just going to jump into sleep for a second. I firmly believe that if we had sound, meaningful sleep, and ate well, we would probably eliminate 70-80+% of the disease processes that were.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Sleep is so important. And you could do also certain sleep hygiene exercises or routines. So at night before you go to sleep, try to minimize artificial light in the house. If you do have some light, it could be dim and low, because our brains know that the sun is high, and blue light, which tends to be the light that we get during the day, is what wakes us up. It confuses us when we have artificial light at night. So starting to do that, and then having the room cool and keeping the room dark. And, those are little things that can happen over time. You'll start to anchor your rhythm. It'll start to get easier and easier to sleep better.
And Michelle, I love all of those tips and tools. I do know that I in our practice, a lot of times I need people to see a practitioner like you, though, because when you create a new homeostasis of disease or chronic disease or infertility or inflammatory issues, the body tries to strike a balance. And so sometimes we need that intervention of needling or moxa or cupping.
Yeah.
For our patient base to get the homeostasis shifted, right? So I call them positive hormetic events, positive influences that encourage the body to establish those rhythms. Where are you located? Where can people physically see you?
Oh, so that's in South Florida, Miami Beach.
Nice.
And I have a practice called the Wholesome Lotus, like you mentioned before, and it's me and two other practitioners. And one of them actually does fertility massage, prenatal massage. She's amazing. She does also regular massage. She's really good.
I'm in Florida all the time. I'm coming.
Oh, awesome. Where in Florida?
Our institute is in Davie, but we have offices in.
Oh, it's close.
Our VA offices are right in Miami, in Kendall.
Oh, awesome.
I know.
So you live in Florida, or you live, where do you live?
So I split my time. I live in Colorado.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I love Colorado.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. Talk about nature.
It is. I know. So I have a ranch. I always say that it's one of my most important medicines that I take on a regular basis. I saw a client the other day, though, that talked about water, being an aspect of medicine when you talk about the elements and the 5 elements. And he said, someone said, oh, you built a pool. Do you ever use your pool? And he said, yeah, every single day, several times a day, because I listen to it and I look at it. And that's the ranch for me, right? It's a really important part of my health and wellness. We just had a retreat. We train nutrition coaches, and we just brought our coaches out to the ranch.
Oh,
and
awesome.
And part of why we do our learnings there versus in a congress or a conference hall is because the elements of nature, open the hormone receptor sites, open the body's capacity to learn.
Oh, I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So, and then how do people, like, what if we wanted to do, I've got a couple clients right now that are really struggling with some of their fertility. Obviously they can grab the book, The Way of Fertility. I love the way that's like really practical things, but how can they coach with you? Where do they go?
Yeah, so michelleoravitz.com would be the best way, and they could book a discovery call and ask any questions, and either myself or my assistant will reach out to them and give them all the information that they would need and the options that we offer.
So Michelle, we have a really large, robust, and lifelong learner community, right? Like, I'm back in school getting my PhD. They're doing coaching training. Everybody's learning about, inflammation and toxins and toxicity. Like, we are just striving to, populate our body with more and more knowledge. Can you please come back? I know we're going to get a host of questions after getting to spend time with you. Can you please come back and
Of course.
Okay,
I'd love
cool.
to.
Okay,
and
cool.
also, I do also certification for fertility coaches. If anybody's interested, I do offer that.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Something really cool to layer in, guys. That's awesome.
It's really fun.
Yeah, I will tell you, someone said the other day to me, that's just people are more open to talking about it. And I said, I don't think so. I mean, we are having, people used to feel like before 35, they had, no problem, no issue in their 20s. We before my mom retired in her practice, she still gets people that she moved up to the mountains that drive up to the mountain to see her. But when we were in Beverly Hills, we were getting from our fertility docs referrals younger and younger and younger. And, in LA, which is where the practice was, we work with a ton of different docs, and the referrals were coming in. It was the irregular periods, but also premature ovarian failure, individuals that lose the opportunity for fertility much younger than we ever thought. So it's critical. And again, in our clinic, we're hiring, a new doc right now, and we're in the search process, and we're like, how open are you to Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine? And, because it's a tool that we don't know how to get people well without. You cannot address the body without addressing the body holistically, especially in a complex disease. So
Absolutely.
Well, I feel very fortunate to have gotten to spend time with you, and my community is going to be thrilled that you just committed to coming back, because I know that they're going to have a lot of questions that pertain to them specifically. And this is why I do this. I really, really appreciate your brilliance, but also your effort, right, in taking, centuries of medicine and helping distill it down for our own personal wisdom. So thank you so much for being here, Michelle. And you guys grab the book, The Way of Fertility. It should be in all of your libraries, because whether you're dealing with fertility or not, we're going to have a friend, a family member, a loved one, as you all are CMO, chief medical officers of your family, of your tribe, of your community. It is a subject that's really important right now. So thanks for writing the book, Michelle. I know how much work that is. And I wish you the best of success with it.
Oh, Haylie, this was such a pleasure talking to you today. And I really appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll talk soon. Thank you.